Hey everyone, Dave here at Tombstone Tech, and as you can see I have a guest in the workshop with me today. This is Walter. Now Walter is a longtime prop in my haunt, and as you can see he plays the banjo and he'll actually talk to the trick-or-treaters. He's a really fun prop, but he's got some problems now. He's not doing too well, so I'm going to do some work on Walter and rebuild him. But first, a little bit about Walter and how he works. Here's a clip of Walter in action at the haunt. So as you can see, that's what Walter does. He plays and he talks to the trick-or-treaters. This is a prop that I pretty much scratch built several years ago. Walter is what is called, or I guess they're still called, a Bucky skeleton, B-U-C-K-Y. Now, Bucky skeletons used to kind of be the gold standard of haunt prop skeletons, but what they were really meant to be were classroom skeletons. Now the great thing about a Bucky is that they're pretty realistic. They are fully articulated. They have every bone and joint that a human body actually has, and they are a little bit heavy and sometimes a little bit difficult to lug around. But they are great skeletons, but what they are made to be is a classroom learning aid. They're a very entry-level skeleton. They're just good for a basic anatomy class. You know, it's like, well, this is an ulna, this is a rib, this is a mandible, that sort of thing. A very entry-level teaching skeleton, but a lot of haunters would buy them and use them as props or decorations. The Bucky skeleton has kind of been supplanted by these guys that you can get, you know, at the big box store or the grocery store. They're not bad looking. They're lightweight and they're posable. They'll actually, you know, lock into position. They're not as articulated. You can't, for example, you know, the arms will, if I move the leg out of the way, the arms will go, you know, forward and you can put them up and so forth. But one thing you can't do with them is put them out. And, you know, they kind of exist in this dimension. The jaw, well, the neck is articulated, which is nice for posing, and the jaw is articulated too, so I could conceivably rebuild Walter into one of these. But for right now, what I want to start with is I want to redo the mechanism that makes him play the banjo. As you can see, the last time he was in use, his, you know, usually the arm goes about like that, and as you can see, the wrist joint broke, and that's just from the repetitive motion of being driven by the little motor that would move his hand up and down to make it look like he was playing the banjo. So let's take a little closer look at Walter, and then we'll start tearing him apart. And I'm going to start with the banjo mechanism. That's probably as far as I'll get in this video. What I really want to do is I want to make the thing that makes him move his hand up and down to strum the banjo, I want to put it inside the banjo instead of being outside. But let's take a little closer look at Walter. First thing is, as you can see, the motor that makes him play the banjo is just one of those little electric motors with the tire on it. See, there it is spinning. These are used with Arduino kits and so forth to make little autonomous cars and robots and that sort of thing. This used to be better hidden inside the rib cage, but I was using him at a haunt and something broke, and I had to do a quick fix by putting him outside there, and then a combination of lighting and his shirt would kind of cover that, so you didn't really notice that. But what I really want to do is put it inside the head of the banjo. That is a real banjo, by the way, that I'm using as a prop. Obviously it doesn't have the strings on it anymore, but in a little bit here I'm going to crack that banjo open and see what I can do to put something inside it to make the hand go. Now, the other outstanding feature on Walter is right here inside his head, and this was a fun thing about the Buckies, is that, what's he looking at? Because they were teaching skeletons, they came with the skull already open, so that if you needed to get in the skull to do anything, you could do it. This is the hook by which he usually hangs, but I'm gonna pop his head open here, if I can do it with one hand. There we go. So right there, that is what makes Walter talk. Now that is the Scary Terry Audio Servo driver circuit board. This was invented by a guy that I know who went by the name Scary Terry out in California. And I was very sad to learn that he passed away a little while back, and it's really too bad. I can't say enough nice things about the guy. He was really nice, really very creative, and very good at what he did. He built some really amazing props. But that is the board that drives the servo, which you can kind of see under the board there. That servo is what makes the jaw move up and down. And basically the way the Scary Terry Audio Servo driver worked was an audio signal that was put into that board. When there was sound present, come on, Walter. When there was sound present, it would drive the servo to one position like that, and then when the sound went away, it would drive the servo to the other position, and it would close. So the effect was, if you had an audio signal, the servo would move with the audio signal to make it look like whatever you were controlling with it was actually talking. So that's Walter. That's how Walter works. And we're going to tear into him, and we're going to start with that banjo. Alright, now at some point I had this banjo open because I stuffed a bunch of rags in there. You hear how that's kind of a dull thump, because it was ringing when he was going back and forth with it on his hand like that. It just made an awful lot of noise, so I stuffed this full of rags to dampen that sound. And I'm trying to remember how this comes apart. However, I think what I'm probably going to do is just cut the skin off the banjo. But first I want to get this screw out of the way that used to keep his arm in place. Oh. Well, there you are. What I'm going to do now, one thing I didn't expect to find in here is this cross piece that's holding the neck, but I might be able to use that to support the mechanism that I will build for making the hand go up and down. I'm not sure. So to get inside the banjo, I just took the quickest route. Out came a box cutter, and I started cutting that drum head off of the banjo. Not as fast as you see me doing here. got a few little trim pieces out, and after a few minutes I had a nice empty banjo to work with. Okay. Hollow banjo. So my intention had always been to replace that drum head skin with a piece of thin wood or hardboard or something that would allow me to maybe mount a motor to it, or at least have something, you know, solid to work with. So I got out my Rockwell Blade Runner saw and I cut a circle out of hardboard. And I was very happy to find out that it fit right where the old skin went with accuracy. So now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to mount that motor. And unfortunately, the motor had a little gear head on it with that wheel with the rubber tire, but there was also another shaft sticking out of the other side of the gear head, and it was taking up a little bit of room. I couldn't put the motor down inside the banjo as deep as I wanted to. So I got out my keyhole saw and I cut that little shaft off. Then I put the back of the banjo back on, and I was happy to find out that with the back of the banjo on, it was actually a bit deeper than I had anticipated. So I might not have needed to cut off the other shaft, but it still made it fit comfortably, so I was happy with that. So the next task was to figure out where I needed that motor to be. I couldn't mount it all the way on the back of the banjo because it would be too far away, so I need a little block of wood to lift the motor up. So I cut a small block from some plywood, and then I cut a little channel in that block so that I could wrap a zip tie around that block of plywood, and the channel would hold the zip tie in place and also make it so that the zip tie wasn't going under the wood. So now, with the motor mounted to the little block of wood, I was able to figure out the position that I wanted to have it in inside the banjo body, and I was able to mount the motor with a couple of wood screws that went in from the back. No one will ever see the back of the banjo, so I didn't mind having a couple of screws sitting in it. And right now I know someone's watching this who's a banjo player, and he's probably crying, and I think his name is probably Paul. So now with the motor in place, I was able to take a square plastic tube, make a hole in it, and attach it to the motor. Then I took some measurements to see where the slot in the fake banjo head would have to be for a shaft to come out of the banjo body to operate the hand. Got out the multi-tool and cut the shaft into the fake banjo head. Had to do a little extra work with a X-Acto knife. And now I had my slot that would permit the mechanism for the hand to stick through the fake banjo head. So I attached a long machine screw to that plastic square tubing, and that's the part that would stick through the banjo head. The other part, of course, went onto the shaft, and there I am testing it to make sure it'll rotate. Then I put the fake banjo head back on, plugged it in, and it worked. So now I had my mechanism in place. Okay, so it is day 2 of the Walter rehab, and I've had a couple of thoughts and some things I want to do. First thing is, I have installed a long screw on this nut at the end here, and I'm just going to tighten this down a little bit. So I think you can see this the screw sticking up right here, and that is what's going to be what holds the hand. Now, I had played around before with the idea of, instead of using Walter's actual fully articulated hand on here, I was going to take one of the hands off of the plastic skeleton that has, replaced the Bucky skeleton. I was thinking about using that hand because it would be lighter, and it's also a fixed hand. It's not all articulated. But then I went out to the store today to get some other stuff. One thing I got some a nylon washer to go on here, which will look better when this thing is white. But the other thing I got that was on clearance at a store was this right here. And I only paid a few bucks for this. It's 3 skeleton hands that stick in the lawn, and they're like chained together. But I thought, you know what? Those would be a good hand to go on there instead of Walter's hand. And then I don't end up with a plastic skeleton with one hand. Hands are a little smaller, but that's okay. I can deal with that. And so I'm going to hinge this hand on here to go up and down. And then the other thing was that I ended up not liking, even though I thought it would be kind of covered by the hand, this big hole here, which is where the the thing comes through that makes the hand go up and down. And I was always going to paint this white, but then at the craft store I found this very thin sheet of foam rubber that I can put on there. And what I like about that is that I can cut a slit for the thing that makes the hand go up and down, and it will quiet any scratching noise on the banjo and hopefully make this whole thing a bit quieter. So that's going to be the last steps in this in rebuilding the banjo, will be to get a hand on there, and then to put this stuff on here. So I think maybe the thing to do is to start by putting this on the face of the banjo. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these washers. Oh, and then, like I said, the other thing was I got that white nylon fender washer, which seems to have gone on the floor down here. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the nylon on this foam. Will it slide? Oh yeah. Yeah, actually there's not much friction there at all, so that should work pretty well. So using the wooden banjo head as a template, I was able to cut out the foam rubber sheet to put on the face of the banjo, and then I used some Super 77 spray adhesive, which ordinarily I use for putting new felt on the pool table, and used that to affix the foam rubber to the fake banjo head. Used a roller to get it on there good and solid. And then I took an X-Acto knife and cut a slit. The hands that I had bought were curled downward, which kind of created a problem, so I used a torch to soften up the fingers and bend them out and make the hand a little more flat. The other problem that I had was that where I wanted to attach one of the fingers to the mechanism, the finger was really skinny. So what I ended up doing was heating up the one fingertip that I wanted to attach to the mechanism, getting it good and pliable. And once it was soft, I whacked it with a hammer to kind of flatten it out. So one finger on that hand is the fingertip looks a little bit spoon-like, but that allowed me to take that spoon shape and drill a hole through it and make a nice solid connection to the mechanism that I could bolt it down and it wouldn't come off. So I gave it a little test by holding the wrist. Then I had to drill kind of a elongated hole in the wrist to accommodate the slight back and forth motion produced by the mechanism making the hand go up and down, and it worked really well. I am good with that. I like it. So now that the banjo was assembled, the next step was to do a little rehab work on Walter. I wanted to get his head so that it wasn't so wobbly and moving around. I made several attempts at that and finally just figured out that if I screwed down the nut on top of his head really tight, it would hold it better, but not perfectly. The other thing that I wanted to do was to really solidly attach Walter to that chair that he's sitting in. So after doing a few repairs on Walter, I took some drywall screws and drove them right through the back of the chair into Walter's shoulder blades. I missed my calling. I really should have been some sort of a surgeon. But once I had his back firmly attached to the chair, I drove a couple of wood screws through the chair so that the chair wouldn't tend to fold. And then I also drove some wood screws through Walter's upper leg bones to attach them firmly to the chair. And now Walter and the chair are one good solid piece, which is going to make transporting him and setting him up a lot easier. Before, he'd been held together with zip ties and armature wire, and that was kind of a pain, so I really wanted to solidify him. Now, I did decide that I would reattach the banjo to Walter using zip ties, and the reason I did that is that having the banjo removable is a great convenience for transporting and storing Walter, and besides that, zip ties are cheap and disposable and they do the job. So once the banjo was zip tied in place and I had Walter's handless wrist up next to the banjo and his other hand on the neck of the banjo, Walter was good to go and ready for a test. Okay. Walter has had enough time to charge up, or his cell phone has, so here he goes. Take it away, Walter. I will have to work on making this quieter, but it's already better than it used to be. So Walter is ready for Halloween this year, so I hope you enjoyed watching the Walter rehab, and there's going to be more videos coming up. Please, please, please subscribe. It really helps, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.